Hi, and welcome to The Working Songwriter, the show where today's best songwriters come to talk shop. I'm your host, Joe Pug. Each episode here, we host a distinguished guest, and we ask them to go deep on their inspiration, on their process, on the general ups and downs of making a life in music. So, whether you're a grizzled veteran, upset that you didn't get the Steely Dan anthology for Christmas, or else a scrappy upstart, upset that you didn't get a Billie Eilish pop socket, this is your show, because ultimately, it is what every writer seeks most, an ironclad excuse to put off actually writing. Hey everybody, it's New Year's Day, 2021. Welcome to a brand new year. Happy to be in this one. This week's episode is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. I'm old enough to remember when you had to pay somebody called a web developer to get a website made, and it would always be some guy named Albert who drove a vintage Jetta with a huge Monster energy drink like window decal on it, and who's always trying to sell you Ritalin packaged in Altoid containers. And old Albert would try to charge you about $1,000 for a website that would be obsolete in 6 months. Well, no more. It's the future now, you guys. That's not how it works anymore. We're allowed to have nice things. One of those nice things is Bandzoogle. Bandzoogle powers the websites of tens of thousands of musicians around the world, from weekend warriors to Grammy winners. All the features you need for a professional website are already built in: hosting and a custom domain name, dozens of fully customizable design templates, the ability to sell your merch commission-free, mailing list tools, social media integrations, and commission-free fan subscription features. Listeners of the Working Songwriter podcast can go to bandzoogle.com to try it for free for 30 days. Simply use the promo code TWS to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. If you'd like to hear some of my music live, you can hear it every single Sunday night on YouTube for Sunday Songs. It's at 9 p.m. Eastern. It's a live stream. I'm live every Sunday night, playing tunes, taking requests, jumping into the chat and taking Q&A. It's a really interactive experience. We're building a bit of a community over there, including many listeners of this podcast. So come on over there on Sunday night. It's completely free. YouTube, just look up Joe Pug or look up Sunday Songs, and you'll find us there. Finally, if you enjoy this podcast, if you'd like to help it remain a viable endeavor for me, here's a few things that you could do to help. You could become a supporter of the show over at Patreon. Patreon is a platform that allows you to directly support creative endeavors that you find meaningful. You just head to their site, Patreon, you search for The Working Songwriter, or you search for my name, and then you sign up to kick in a few bucks every month. Think of it as a voluntary subscription, a subscription that you don't have to pay, but that you just choose to pay because you dig the show and you're not going to miss a few bucks every month. If just 1% of our listenership would kick in the price of a cup of coffee every month, it would make a huge difference for me. So thanks for everybody who's already done that. If you're not in a place where you can kick in financially, I totally get it. I've been there. You could still help out our show by either leaving us a review in the iTunes store or simply telling a friend about the show. Spreading the word. The simple math on those two last things is that they will help me much more than they will be a pain in the ass for you. I'll end all the harassment there. Corb and I have toured the same circuit for years. I feel like I always see a poster of his in clubs that I'm about to play, and it was just really great to connect with him here. I'd never met him, and this was a really, really fun conversation to have. So thank you, Corb, for your time, and I hope you guys enjoy the show. Our guest this month grew up in southern Alberta, in a world steeped in cowboy traditions that hail from another age entirely. Corb Lund comes from a long line of ranchers, and as a child, he witnessed the oral tradition of cowboy songs and ballads passed along on the farm. Eventually, he embarked on a music career of his own. Since 2005, he's toured incessantly with his band, the Hurtin' Albertans, with their unique blend of honky-tonk and traditional balladry. He has released 9 albums, 3 of which are certified gold in Canada. He's recorded for New West Records and Loose Music. He's been nominated 5 times for one of Canada's prestigious Juno Awards, and he won in 2006 for Roots Album of the Year. Saving Country Music has said of his latest album, Corb Lund has gone from the best-kept secret of cowboy music to a living legend of it. His plain-spoken yet cunning knack for poetry, combined with the real-world perspective on the plights and joys of rural folks living under western skies, makes for some of the most compelling country and western music you can find. Corb and I were connected by our mutual friend Hayes Carl, and I got a chance to talk on the phone with him earlier this month and hear about his journey so far. Are you cool if I just dive right into the interview here?
Yeah, man, sure.
Awesome.
Yeah, is the signal okay?
Yeah, you're coming through loud and clear. So.
We gotta have a beer. We gotta have a beer sometime. Funny, we never met. It's weird. I don't know. Know all the same.
We've had very parallel roads for the last 10 years, and I guess our closest mutual friend would probably be Hayes.
Yeah.
You know?
Do you know Evan? You know Turnpike?
I don't know Turnpike at all. I'm really good friends with BJ from American Aquarium, who's good buddies with those guys. But no, I've never run into Turnpike on the road. So
yeah, we probably played a lot of the same bars, huh?
Man, that's what I'm saying. You know, calling you up and being like, "How you doing with the last 8 months?" Because pretty much you and I were just like running in a circle for the last 10 years.
Yeah.
Either I was a month behind you.
You ever done that thing? Yeah. You ever done that thing where you see your buddy's band poster and they're like there at the same bar like a week later, so you write a note on the poster? Oh,
hell yeah, man! I mean, I do that so much.
I've been trying to write a song about that somehow, to like convey that idea somehow to people that like you never see your buddies, but you see them at festivals in the summer, and then the rest of the year you just write notes on their next week poster or whatever.
Man, yeah, I don't know how you'd quite write that, and I don't know if that song is going to be dated or not after coronavirus, because I don't know how many of those damn clubs are still going to be in business when we come back, man.
Yeah, that's tough. Like, why don't you just hit record?
Oh no, I am recording right now. Yeah. So.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yes.
Yeah.
So.
That's one of. Good.
Yeah, so I don't know how many of those damn clubs are going to be in business when we open back up again.
Yeah, that's going to be a real loss, because those clubs are cultural, or many of them are cultural institutions, right? And it's kind of, I feel bad for younger, like really young bands who are just getting started, because it's probably tough on them. But I feel like some of us are in a position where, as much as this sucks, we can hibernate for a few years and pop up again and fire it up. But once a classical venue is gone, it's gone. I mean, somebody else might open it up, but you lose all that culture and continuity, right?
No, you really do. And I mean, you hit the nail on the head there. For guys like you and me, there's ways that if you're the singer or songwriter for a band, there's ways that we can still move forward, make a little bit of scratch to keep the lights on and all that. But it's really tough on younger bands, on musicians who are just hired guns in bands and bars.
Side guys. Yeah, it's tough on my guys. We've managed as best we could, but at a certain point, there's just no more income, right?
I mean, that's just it. I'm usually just a solo act. I had a long-time band for a while, and I parted ways with them in 2015. I just kind of toured solo, and I've thought a lot about, like, man, what the hell would I have done if I just still had these guys on the payroll? I mean, there's just no money.
Yeah, it's tough. It's funny. I used to tell people, years ago when Napster happened, 15 years ago, whenever that was, the whole digital thing happened to our industry. Downloading started. People used to ask about that constantly in interviews, and I used to say something like, "Well, I've always been mostly a live guy. Like I make a few bucks from royalties and sell some records, but the primary source of my income is live performance and selling T-shirts live, and live. No matter what happens in the music business, live isn't going away. ... So I guess I jinxed that, didn't I?
You were really tempting fate with that. Well, although
Yeah.
it took 20 years for fate to catch up with you, but it sure as hell did.
Yeah, I planted the seed in the devil's head a long time ago.
Exactly. Well, I wanted to start out today's interview a little bit with there's so many people that play country music that didn't kind of come from that background culturally, but from what I have been able to tell, you really come from a genuinely rural background. Can you tell me a little bit about growing up and what life looked like for you in Alberta as a kid?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's correct. Well, both sides of my family were ranchers in Utah and Nevada, like 120 years ago, and then they moved north. They kind of followed parallel paths, actually. My dad's side of the family moved up here on the turn of the century, and so did my mom's, and they both homesteaded up here. My great-grandfathers and ranched up here. And then, yeah, my mom and dad met through rodeo, and I grew up in a very western setting up here in the Rockies, riding steers when I was a kid and chasing cows and doing all that stuff. And I listened to the music at I'm sure we'll get to this, so I might as well just jump into it. The very first record, the most formative record of my life, and still actually my favorite record, is the Pink Marty Robbins Gunfighter Ballads and Trail Songs album.
Okay.
Coulter actually just recorded one of those tunes, Big Iron. But that record, I started listening to that record when I was, 5. When as soon as you're aware of music, that was the first record I can remember being aware of. And it's because like both sides of my family go so far back in the West, and the cowboy culture and ranch culture, it spoke to me. That's why I heard it. My dad was a fan too, right? My grandpa was a fan. So yeah, that was the very first influence I had. And my grandfathers used to sing old cowboy ballads. There's one called Strawberry Roan, and one called Little Joe the Wrangler, and one called When the Work's All Done This Fall, and Streets of Laredo, that kind of stuff. So they weren't singers. I feel like they were on the tail end of the era when music wasn't as much of a career as it was a social thing. Like a lot of those old cowboys used to sing songs just as personal entertainment or / transmission of oral history, kind of like balladeering, really, before there was a whole ton of, like, the radio and mass media consolidates everything, right? And there's always something to do now, but in the old days, people sat around and sang songs and read books, right?
And probably wrote songs too, and didn't, wasn't running to a publisher with it immediately. I've heard some stories of people kind of in that time in the 30s and 40s when mass media was starting to come up. Some people would go around and, they go through Appalachia, or maybe they go through the Rockies where cowboys were, and they go, hey, anyone in this town got a good song that they like to sing? And someone say, oh yeah, I do. And they come down and sing it. Then that bastard would go to Nashville and just copyright everything.
I've heard those. I've heard whispers of those stories too. There's a guy I play at this event. Well, not this year, but most years, called the Elko, Nevada Cowboy Poetry Gathering, and it's a real traditional cowboy music festival, which isn't what I do all the time, but a little bit of my stuff fits into that category. So they allow me to play. But there's a friend of mine there. His name is Andy Hedges. He's a poet, and he's also a real historian of the exact stuff you're just talking about. And he told me some wild stuff about that kind of thing.
Like what?
And there's also, just stuff like I don't remember the details, but stuff like you were saying, like hustlers or hucksters or whatever, going around and doing exactly what you said, like recording songs and then going to cut them and claiming the copyright, and then the family sues them 40 years later, that kind of stuff. And there's even some songs he noted that I can't recall at the moment, but some old songs that they're not even sure who wrote them, and who. There's been some dispute over it. It's been so long ago, we'll probably never know. But yeah, stuff's fascinating. That brings up an interesting thing a tidbit that I find fascinating about some of those Marty Robbins songs. Some of the same ones that were on that Gunfighter Ballads album were songs that my grandfathers would sing. And it was really cool because when I started digging into it, as in my early 20s, when I started to remember that stuff from my youth, there's some lines in the songs that my grandfathers sang differently than the Marty Robbins version. And since then I've investigated it, and there's other versions too, but it's really cool because like there wasn't a radio or a Spotify to solidify the popular version. So it would drift, right? So some of the geographic references in the version my grandpa would sing have drifted to reflect like Alberta references. Like there's a line, about when we camped out on the Pecos, Texas stuff. And my grandpa sang it. He would sing Camped Out on Pig Ann, which is a native reserve up here in Alberta. So I think that kind of thing's really fascinating the way in those days music acted as a, I don't know, it's more of a personal sort of social oral history component to it. You know what I mean? Cool.
Yeah, and it shows you that being a musician as your job could not really exist until there was some ability to have, the property of a copyright, basically. Because without that, you just had to. You were a guy that maybe wrote songs while he was working, and people really liked them, but you weren't going to get paid for it.
Right. That's a good point, Joe. Have you toured Ireland before?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, so once we were over there, we played I was over there at the band, and we played in the venue. And the venue had a pub attached to the front. And the promoter said to me, hey, the boys liked your show. They want you to come and sit in with them. So you go into the pub, and it's like, how it is over there. It's like 800-year-old pub, right?
Right.
And there's the old boys are just jamming Irish tunes in the booths, right? And I sat in with them, and it was like playing my tunes and old cowboy songs, and it was the best. I wish I had a recording. It was amazing. And the thing is, these guys are just melt your face players, and they're all just blue collar working guys. Like, that's not their gig. It's just the way they do for fun, right?
Man, I wish there was more of a culture of that over here.
Different outlook. Yeah, I agree. I tell people that, like, in terms of all the places I've gone, the places where music's the biggest part of the culture is Ireland and probably Texas.
Yep.
Because as you probably know, the Texans, for whatever reason, just really, there's way more people on the street who probably know who, Stoney LaRue is than people in Alberta know who the indie artists up here are, right? Like, they really embrace their songwriters there,
I've never been to and like you, I've toured all over the place. I've never seen anything like, particularly Texas. I mean, Ireland certainly has that that creative tradition and that musical tradition spanning back, centuries. But there's something about currently being in Texas where you can be an artist that makes their entire career just touring Texas and like a good career. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like, an own a house type of career.
We all know those guys. Yeah. Yeah, those are some huge stars that never leave the state. They go to Oklahoma once a year.
Right. Yeah, they cross the Red River once to go collect some loot and go back home.
Yeah. Yeah, God bless them, because those guys that's actually, Texas was the place that embraced me first in the States, for sure. Like, even before, I didn't spend a lot of time touring Montana or Wyoming, which are much closer to me. The Texans were the ones that kind of picked up on my stuff in America first. So
it kind of feels good too when I lived in Texas for a while, and I finally got a following down there after some years, and it feels really good to be accepted by Texas music listeners, because you kind of feel like you've crossed a pretty important bar.
Yeah. Well, they know their stuff, right?
They do.
Yep, true. No, it's definitely it's a big compliment. And it feels validating, right?
Yeah. No, it is like so I live in Maryland, right outside of Washington, D.C., and there's some incredible guitar players that have come out of this area, like John Fahey and a guy named Roy Buchanan. But unless you're like a real music nerd, like I am to a certain degree, there's no cultural awareness of that, of like a guy who's a plumber here in PG County is not probably going to know who those two guys are. Whereas in Texas, if you're a working class guy in Texas or gal in Texas, there's a pretty good chance you're going to know who Townes Van Zandt was. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. No, that's great. It's a good thing.
It is a good thing. So you're there. You're living a pretty genuinely rural lifestyle, and one that has roots in your family that goes back, over a century. You're talking about the recorded music that you heard. Were there people touring to where you were and playing like shows, or would you have to go to a bigger city to see a show? How did live music kind of make its way into your life all the way out there?
Yeah, that's a good question. It didn't until I was in my late teens, I guess. And by that time, I had discovered Black Sabbath and that kind of thing. So to me, it's funny because I guess there's people that pay a lot of money to go and do ranchy stuff. But to me, that just seemed like normal. I figured, oh, everyone does that. This heavy metal stuff sounds interesting. That stuff was exotic to me. So yeah, I got into real heavy stuff for my 20s, and I had a band called the Smalls, and we were doing like an underground sort of real indie do-it-yourself, kind of a sped up Sabbath / Slayer kind of thing with a singer that was like a singer. So yeah, and I think probably, and then when I was in my 20s, obviously I kind of re-embraced my family roots and then started writing Western songs. But I think that I tell people that if there's any sort of, I don't know, quirkiness to my writing, I think it comes from the years spent in the rock band, because, you know, it was an indie scene where you were super encouraged to you'll understand this, but not all mainstream people do, but like you were encouraged to find your own voice and find a new sound and do weird stuff and try things. So my whole songwriting approach was kind of forged in that kind of an environment. So I think I bring that a little bit to what I'm doing now. That and the band awareness. I was going to talk about that because I feel like, you know, when you get the journey of a song from when you think of something in your head to when it gets onto the record is a long journey. And being able to play the tune on an acoustic guitar for somebody is part of that. That's probably 2/3 of the way. But then, like, the band arrangement is so huge, as you'll know, right?
Yeah.
Like, you get into the studio and show the band, and it could go 10 or 12 different ways, right? It could end up as a rock song or a country song or a reggae song, all depending on what the band does. So I think some of my band arrangement stuff that I work with my guys on now comes from those days. I think
the worst part about going into a studio and that phenomenon is, like, invariably the song that you really want to come through is not the one that the band figures out immediately, and then the last song that you ever thought would make the record is the one that the band, like, they just freaking nail it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know what it is about that.
Yeah, no, it's 100%. That's totally, like, the stage from songwriter showing it to the band on guitar to finished recording product. It can be a real black box, right?
Yeah.
Like, you don't know what you can get. Although, you know, the other flip side of it is that sometimes they totally surprise you and it's fucking awesome, right?
No, it really can be. And, you know, there's no way around it, because otherwise, if there's one thing that makes musicians uninspired, it's you coming in and from on high just putting them in a box of, this is how it's going to sound, do it exactly like this. I mean, you're just going to end up with the most flaccid performances of all time. So you got to kind of take the risk of letting them do what they do.
Yep, it's true, 100%. I've got the same band I've had for my whole career too, so that's a little different.
Oh, sure.
Because like some of my stuff, I can almost guarantee how it's going to turn out, because it's that kind of a song, and my guys know me, and I don't have to tell them anything, and they just nail it. But there's other songs, you know, I'm always trying to stretch stylistically. So yeah, for sure, you're right. And you just got to drop the reins sometimes, see what happens. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, right?
So talk to me about the transition from, this heavier rock sound, and then you said, you know, maybe mid to late 20s is when you kind of re-embraced your roots. Can you kind of talk about that process and how it happened? I mean, it had to feel a little awkward at first, because they're so different, these two genres and styles that you're talking about here.
Yeah, you know, it's funny. It actually didn't. It felt to me like painting in oils versus pencil sketches. Like it was just, or playing hockey and playing football. It didn't really, because to me it's just all kind of music. Like, from the outside, the biggest difference, honestly, is cultural, right? Like the cultural difference between, you know, writing Western music versus heavy stuff is just, it's people dress different and stuff mostly. I mean, in terms of writing, like, in fact, I was always trying to wedge Western lyrics into our heavier tunes, which sometimes worked and sometimes didn't. But like, what happened with me is I never really stopped listening to the, you know, country stuff and older country stuff and Western stuff, even during my period in the rock band. So I think about halfway through the 90s, when we were doing our rock band, I made my first sort of indie country record. First couple, actually. And then when the rock band retired, I just hit the ground running and made a new record and went on from there. But it's kind of like, yeah, a lot of the actual process of writing the tunes isn't that different. You know, just different kind of palette you're using.
Wow.
Granted, I was also not the singer in that band. I wrote probably maybe a quarter of the lyrics. I did some co-lead stuff, but I was the bass player in that band and one of the writers. So it was a much different role than having to sing and write songs that you think will work for your voice. It's kind of a different thing. But yeah, the toolbox is kind of the same.
And as far as, stepping from bass player to, the main guy, the guy that's not only singing and playing guitar, but whose name is on the marquee, how is that transition for you? There's a lot of responsibility at that point when you step into the spotlight like that.
Heavy is the crown, right? No, it's 100%. Like I actually look back at those days with fondness, because just drinking a beer and rocking out playing bass in a rock band is great, super fun. But it's like, as long as you don't screw up the bass line, there's not that much else you have to worry about.
Right.
But when I'm doing this, I'm thinking about the next song. Is the mix good, and did they sell any tickets, and here's a new song, I hope people like it, and I hope the guitar playing is on the wall tonight. There's so many more responsibilities.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I think everyone would assume that the bass player in the band is longingly looking at the lead singer spot, but what they don't know is in the middle of a tour, the lead singer is longingly looking at the bass player drinking a beer blissfully.
Yeah. No, I wouldn't trade it, because I've always wanted to express myself that way as the writer. I mean, as a singer, I love singing live. It's one of my very favorite things to do, and so yeah. But yeah, I mean, playing tight end's fun. Playing linebacker's fun.
For sure. So how did you get, Corb Lund and the Hurtin' Albertans off the ground? Did you guys just start touring a bunch? Was there a particular record that went out and kind of primed the way for you guys? How did you get it from upstart project to what it is today?
Just grinding, like fully do it yourself. Like my whole approach was, like I said, not only the songwriting, as I mentioned before, but the whole approach to the band thing was super indie. That was just baked into my DNA. Because you asked me a few minutes ago about the first live act, for how live music impacted me at the beginning. I remember, me and my singer buddy, his name's Mike, that was in the old band. We left our small town out of high school and went to Edmonton, which is a bigger city up here, and to go to a jazz school, because it was the only music school we knew of. And the first week we were up there, we saw one of those shitty photocopied posters that was, pasted to a light post, kind of thing, kind of off kilter, it's a punk rock poster. And it was this band called SNFU, which is sort of a very famous sort of like Western Canadian punk band from the late 80s. And we went and saw those guys. And I'd seen a few big shows before, like the touring rock acts that would come through the local arena. But we went to this little crappy hall, and, some kid was selling tickets, and it's super do-it-yourself, right? And we waited around, drank some beer, and then this band hit the stage and just blew us away. It was just like energy. And at that moment, I was like I was already pretty sure I wanted to play music, but at that moment, it was a realization to us that you don't need a label or an agent or a publicist. You just need a phone, and you can book your own tour, and you can just book a hall and rent a PA and put up some posters and just do it. So we just did it. And then I approached my Corb Lund career at the beginning the same way too. Just it's funny, because you run into people, I'm sure you have too, where they made a demo or something, and then you talk to them 2 years later, and they're like, well, we're just waiting for the manager, because he talked to the guys in Nashville for us, and it's like 2 more years pass. Oh, we're just waiting for the publisher. And it's like, fuck, dude, 4 years of your life have gone by. You could have been touring and making records the whole time.
I know.
And that's how I've always used it. I've never waited for the music business. I've just gone and done things, and then, eventually you amass enough of a reputation or audience that come to you, right?
I have run my career in the same way. In fact, just recently in the last year, for just like a week or two, I ran it in a different way. Like I was basically holding a project up for a second for someone else to listen to it and maybe, become a part of it. And it literally, dude, it took me like 2 weeks. I was waiting to hear back for 2 weeks. And after like the 14th day, I was like, fuck this. I just went and got the records pressed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's just like, man, just like you said, I'm not going to sit here encased in amber waiting to see whether you think you like what I do or not. I don't care if you specifically like what I do. I like it, and enough people out there like it too that I can make it happen and move on.
Yeah, I think that's the way. I mean, the downside is the odds are I'm probably never going to be George Strait either at massive fill arenas, but that's okay. I mean, I'm doing exactly. It's funny because you read the bios and stuff, and it's like I got to L.A. or I got to Nashville, and my producer told me I had to change my style. And I've had not one iota of that my entire career. I've never had anybody say to me, "Dude, you got to like do it differently." I guess it's just because I could tell that that's not what I'm up to. But it's like I feel really fortunate that I've been able to make a career out of doing pretty much exactly what I want to do musically.
Yeah.
And I feel like I wanted to point. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm listening.
Oh, I was just going to say I wanted to point out that wasn't really even a dig at the music business. I understand how it works. Like they gravitate towards stuff that makes money, and that's how it works. And it's much easier for them to find a crop of fresh-faced 22-year-olds every couple of years and cycle them through the. I don't really blame anyone for that. That's just how the system works. But I didn't mean to sound high and mighty about it. It's just that I've always been so driven. Like the end goal for me is to be on stage singing the songs because that just feels so good. So it just makes me feel good. So I just have always done whatever steps I felt needed to be done to get to that point, right?
Yeah, well, and it's also, there's also not even close to being any sort of guarantee that if you do things a different way or if you take the advice to change what you do, that then you automatically get to become George Strait. In fact, that's a lottery ticket almost to get to that level. So, I've always really preferred taking the sure thing path of like, it's a sure thing that if I work really hard and put out records and put on shows and put my best foot forward, it's a sure thing that I'll be able to make a living. It might be a tough living, but it'll be a living and I can keep on doing it.
And more importantly, you look back and you did what you wanted to do for 20 years, right? Or 50.
See, yeah. And that's the thing, man. It's like, the last couple of years, I've had a couple of kids. I'm getting older. I'm staring down, I'm about to be 40 in a few years. And what's really cool is since I've been doing creative work, I don't know if you feel the same way, but aging has felt a lot different to me because there's really nothing that I look back and say, woulda, coulda, shoulda. I should have done. I'm just like, man, there's been some tough times, but I've also kind of gotten to do exactly what I want. There's no, I'm not going to be wetting my cheek with a single tear over getting older. It's been a blast doing it this way.
Well, and look at I'm assuming here, but look at the rich experience you've had.
Yeah.
The friends you've met and the places you've seen and the crazy shit you've seen at 2 a.m, all of it, right?
No. It's, I think I've also really, I've been off the road, obviously, for the last 8 months. And then even in the last few years, I've cut back on how much I toured. And when I was in my height of touring, I really didn't appreciate how much stuff I was able to see. And now when I'm talking to other people who don't have this job, I really realize like they'll start talking about like Kansas City or no matter where they talk about it, I'm like, oh yeah, this is the place to eat there. And this is the bar and this is the hang, like it's a pretty cool experience we've had.
It's a gold-plated passport, man. It's the best. Like I guarantee we had more interesting experiences than people that paid the biggest money for the best tour of a place, tourist-wise. Like, because there's always somebody who wants to show you the cool dive bar or the coolest restaurant or come check out the museum or come to my house and whatever, right? And you get the real culture, right? You do. And yeah. I feel like you used the word lottery earlier, and that's actually funny because I was going to say the same thing. It's funny because I run into enough we brush up against the country music business sometimes, especially up here because it's a smaller industry. And I have people. I guess I'm old enough now that long in the tooth enough that people, I'll have, a rancher guy say, "Oh, my daughter's 15 and she really wants to play music, and do you have any advice?" And I'm like, "Oh God, I kind of know where to start," because it's like so many. I tell them what I told you, because I tell them just write your own tunes, do it your own way, make your own record, book your own tour, and if you get help from the industry, great, but don't count on it, because there's so many. I've so many people. You run into a young girl or something whose parents really want the best for her, and they're like, she wants you made a contact in Nashville, and it's just, you want to tell them, just don't even bother with that. I mean, no. I guess take a shot, but it is a lottery ticket, like you said. But like, even my cousin, I have a cousin that's 17. She's a great singer and a fearless performer. She's way ahead of where I was at that age, and her folks want to help her out, and I lean on her as much as I can. I'm like, write your own tunes. I'm even trying to get her to make a record with my band, just indie style, because I think it'd be good for her to do that and see how it's all done, right? But they've at different stages been in the process of waiting on someone in Nashville or waiting for someone's response to the demo or bullshit like that. And it's like, just make the record, write your own tunes and do it.
Have you ever had this happen to you? You casually mention to a friend that you're thinking about getting into gardening, and then the next time you open up your internet browser, you're bombarded with advertisements for Mr. T chia pets. That phenomenon can be explained by the 21st century maxim, if you don't know what the product is, you are the product. Why is Google search free? Why is Facebook free? It's because when you use their services, your browsing history and online data becomes the product for them to sell to other companies to advertise to you. Well, to hell with that. Your online data should be private and yours alone. What do you need? You need a virtual private network that protects your online data. NordVPN runs in the background while you go about your online business and keeps your data private. It doesn't log any of your activity, and it encrypts your data to provide online anonymity. Listeners to the Working Songwriter Podcast can go to nordvpn.com/TWS, the initials of our show. That is nordvpn.com/TWS, and get 68% off. That's less than $4 per month and 1 month free. Help our show out and protect your data at the same time. As you're hearing, Corb's music doesn't come out of a vacuum. It comes from a long spoken word tradition of cowboy poetry. One of the most iconic poems to come out of that genre is entitled Anthem by a poet named Buck Ramsey. And in the morning I was riding out through the breaks of that long plain, and leather creaking in the quieting would sound with trot and trot again. I lived in time with horse hoof falling, I listened well and heard the calling. The earth my mother bade me, though I would still ride wild and free, and as I flew out on the morning, before the bird, before the dawn, I was the poem, I was the song. My heart would beat the world a warning. Those horsemen now rode all with me, and we were good, and we were free. We were not told, but ours the knowing, we were native strangers there among the things the land was growing. To know this gave us more to care, to let the grass keep at its growing, and let the streams keep at their flowing. We knew the land would not be ours, that no one has the awful powers to claim the vast and common nesting, to own the life that gave him birth, much less to rape this Mother Earth, and ask her for her mother's blessing, and ever live in peace with her, and dying, come to rest with her. Oh, we would ride, and we would listen, and hear the message on the wind. The grass in the morning dew would glisten, until the sun would dry and blend the grass to ground and air to skying. We'd know by bird or insect flying, or by their mood, or by their song, if time and moon were right or wrong. For fitting works and rounds to weather, the critter coats and leaves the trees, might flash some signal with a breeze, or wind and sun on flower or feather. We knew our way from dawn to dawn, and far beyond, and far beyond. Talk to me a little bit about how you talked a little bit already about how your creative process worked, going from writing the harder stuff to the the more Western sound. Talk to me about what your writing process looks like today, and how it differs from when you first started writing under your own name.
How it's changed from the beginning of my country career, you mean?
Yeah.
Till now?
Mm-hmm.
Or that's a good question. It hasn't changed a ton. I mean, I guess I trust myself a little more because I've just done it more. But it remains the same in that I still don't really know what I'm doing. I say that it's sort of tongue in cheek, but I kind of mean it too, because I honestly think that the struggle and the mystery of it is key. I think that's part of the process. I think if people, I don't know, maybe, yeah, at least me, I feel like if I got to the point where I was like, yep, I got this. I know how to write tunes. I'm good at this. I can do this. That probably I would start to suck at that point. But yes. I don't know. I think the psychological hell and the second guessing and the ups and downs and the mood swings, I think that's all. I think you got to go through hell every time and it's a good record. I don't think there's any escaping it, no matter how many times you've done it before. So, but I think, so my process, basically, the nuts and bolts of it is that, I'm in the habit, like all of us are, of writing down the ideas that come to me when I'm driving or running or just washing the dishes or whatever. Like, I have a difficult time with the Nashville style of having having a write at 10 a.m. Okay, go. Unless I have something to work on already. Like, it's impossible for me to sit down and deliberately come up with some inspiration. So the way I do it is I have a notebook, or it's my phone now, but I'm constantly recording little lines of lyrics or snippets of riffs or whatever. And then when the work part comes, it's just a matter of sitting down, looking at all the germs of ideas I have and slowly banging them into shape. And I seldom ever write one in an afternoon. I usually have 10 or 20 on the go. And so if I'm going to spend an afternoon writing, I'll pick each one up for half an hour and polish it a little bit. So it'll take me months to write them usually. There's exceptions, but that's usually how it goes.
I love that. That's not exclusively how I write, but I do write like that sometimes where there's multiple things going. And the reason I really like that style of writing is because when you sit down to work on a particular afternoon, there's no pressure on any particular song working easily, because if it doesn't come to you easily that afternoon, you just move on to something else.
Yeah, that's exactly what I find. I just pick it up, and if it's not working, I put it down again, even after 5 minutes, because something's bound to click. I mean, some days nothing clicks, but most days something will click, and you'll get a couple lines, or improve the melody, or have a breakthrough with the rhythmic feel, or yeah. And I've had a couple where I've just sat down and they've just poured out, but it's rare.
Yeah,
and I feel like the one thing I've learned is not to force shit, because there's perspiration involved, but if I hit a wall, I just leave it alone.
For sure.
I guess.
I mean, I have had some processes where I've forced myself to like finish, tunes, and all I ended up with was a bunch of wasted time, because 100% of the tunes that I was having a hard time with, that I didn't think were going to turn out, 100% of them did not turn out. So
yeah, you can always revisit them. I've had it happen where a year later, 5 years later, even that tune I wrote with Hayes, that Bible on the Dash song, I had that literally half done for 5 years, and then he just helped me finish it. But I mean, sometimes you have something sitting stale for a long time, and then you look at it again, and you're like, oh, that's pretty cool. What if I just tweak this? And it's like, why didn't I think of that 5 years ago? But can't force it.
Well, and that's another argument against pushing through and finishing it at the time, because I feel like, let's say, 5 years before, if you had Bible on the Dash and you're like, well, I don't like the way that this is going to finish here, but I should push through and do it, you would have kind of considered it a finished song at that point, and maybe you wouldn't have felt the same ability to pick it back up again years later with fresh ears.
Well, that's exactly right, because I almost feel like I almost am against it strongly, because if I know that if it's a third finished and I know that third is gold, then I don't want to sully it. I'd rather wait and make sure the rest of it measures up to the first third than forcing the finish and knowing that it could have been better. And I have a few that I did that too, and I wish I didn't. Like, I wish I would have let them ripen a little more, like they're green bananas when I released them. You know what I mean?
I have the same thing. I got one in particular that I'm thinking about right now that I'm just so angry about it because it was going to be really good, and now I can't unhear. It's like I can't unhear the shitty finishing. You know what I mean? Like I can't go. Like I built walls in a house that are terrible walls, but I can't go out and knock them out now because they're load bearing.
That's good. I like that. Yeah, I hear you.
Who have been some people for you along your way in the business, whether they're artists or just other people in the business that you've looked up to that have helped you along, and who are they, and what did you learn from them?
There's a fellow up here who's 87 now. His name's Ian Tyson. He wrote. Do you know about him? He wrote "Someday Soon" and "Four Strong Winds."
Say his name again.
He's Ian Tyson.
Ian Tyson. Yeah, I've heard of him.
He was part of the Ian and Sylvia folk duo in the '60s, and then he's written a lot of Western material since then. But he's been he's sort of a icon in the cowboy music world. He's from the same neck of the woods as me, so he's been kind of a mentor and a buddy. And he's we've written together and toured together a bunch, and he's fun to watch because he's one of those old cranky guys who's been in the music business since the '60s and doesn't trust anyone. It's kind of awesome. But he's one, and I mean, honestly, it sounds trite, but some of my contemporaries like Hayes and Felker from Turnpike, like I'm really proud of Turnpike because you know how we were talking about before, there's like the indie route and then there's massive success, right? Mm-hmm. But every once in a while somebody hits it and like they're really good and unique, but they hit the big time too. And I feel like Turnpike's done that, and Stapleton and the White Stripes, you know. So when you see like a band that's really great, but we all know so many actors that are like great, but they're never going to be big.
Yeah.
So it feels so good when you see a big act that's really damn good too. And I look up to the Turnpike guys for that. Kevin's a good friend, but also he's a mentor in his own way.
There is something really satisfying about seeing a band that just has it all, that has the tunes, that has, you know, the musical chops, that has kind of the indie pedigree to them. To see that hit like another level, you know, like maybe you look away from them for a year and then you look back and you're like, wait, that person is headlining the festival now? Like that.
Yeah, it's like, hey, the good guys won.
The good guys won. Yeah, exactly, man. Darth Vader didn't win this time. Luke took it right into the Death Star and beat him.
Yeah. It's really amazing what Chris Stapleton's been doing, and he's sustaining it. Like it wasn't, you know, a few years ago where they gave him all those awards. Sometimes that happens, and it's like the industry sort of offloading their guilt or something. But they really honored him. But he's been able to keep up the career and get bigger and bigger. Amazing, it's great.
Oh yeah, and some. I mean, he over the summer, I just interviewed a guy on here who wrote with him a ton. This guy named Kendall Marvel, who's a great guy to talk to, and he was telling me, you know, before COVID hit, he was getting ready to go out and open for Stapleton, and they're literally just playing stadiums, like literally stadiums.
Yeah, man. No, he's a shining light for all of us weirdos, right?
Really, man. It's and it just goes to show that audiences are smart and audiences do have taste, and when they hear something like that that's undeniable, they you know, there's no amount of music business muscle that can just muscle you into playing stadiums. That's the people making the choice.
Yeah. You know, I think that the music business is really not much different than the running shoe business or the fast food business. You know, I think the way a lot of times that the system is set up, it's for profit, which is fine, I guess. But it's what it is. It's for profit. It's for fast turnover, and it's easier for them to churn stuff out. Same as they churn. I would say it's like the difference between a pair of Nike runners made in China or whatever versus a handmade pair of boots, or you know, a grass raised steak versus a McDonald's burger. That's what the good stuff is for music too. And it's just the way that the mainstream part of the system is set up. It's almost inevitable in a system that we live in that music is going to end up that way. So you just have to make a choice if you want to do that or something else. I'm not even upset. When I was younger, I used to make me mad, but now I just think it's what it is, right?
Well, yeah, and I think maybe when I was younger, it used to make me bad too, or not bad, but used to make me mad as well. But I think what I wasn't realizing then was, I think in my mind at that time, I thought, well, I could just go there and why can't I have my cake and eat it too, be part of this huge system and then do whatever I want? And it's like, that's not how it works really, man. Not everyone gets to be Radiohead, basically, which is make amazing art exactly the way that you want to, and then be, basically a mass commercial product. Generally, if you want to do something like that, your life and your creative output is going to be very circumscribed.
Yeah. Well, there's some luck in it, right? There's a luck element. So, like people like us we have a ticket, but we've also got a career in addition to the ticket. So, if we're never filling stadiums, whatever.
Yeah.
And I know people who I've talked to, like artists that are in that world, and they're not. I'm sure lots of them are thrilled, but I've talked to a couple at the medium level that aren't that stoked because they told me they wish they played in bands that, like, they said stuff to me joking over beer, like, "Shit, you can just write whatever you want, hey?" Right. I'm like, yeah, I guess. So, like, I mean, we have people in our position have experienced the thrill of expressing art. This sounds really high-handed, but I don't mean it that way. But me and you and my friends, we've felt what it feels like to fully express ourselves to people with no restrictions, right? And some of the folks that get caught up in the system will never know that feeling. Maybe they know a feeling that's even better. I don't know, but I'm pretty happy with it.
And this might be me. I agree with you, and this might be me. I don't know, looking at things in kind of a maudlin way here, but I think on this level where you're going out and you're playing bars year over year, that's a level where you can get out, and the people that come to see your shows in the same cities every year, you kind of get to know those people a little bit because they come and they want to buy you beer afterwards. And I just had an experience where this guy who'd been coming for 10 years to see my shows.
Well, they're loyal as hell too, right?
Yes. Well, and they kind of become a part of your life. Like this one guy been coming to shows for 10 years. When my son was born, he sent this nice piece of artwork with my son's name on it, and he had some health problems, and I just heard from his sister and his parents that he passed away last month, and it really hit home, and I was like, holy crap! Like, in my mind, it was like, oh, this guy's a fan of my band or whatever, and it's like, no, it turns out this guy was my friend, actually, and it's. Again, I don't want to sound too maudlin, but it's been pretty cool to do it on this level because, to a certain degree, I've made real connections with people who are listeners to my music.
Yeah, it's for sure real. 100%. Like, I look at it that way too. Like, any the years I spent in the van, and I still spend time in the van, but like when I had no money at all, and all those things, I liked it because it was like, to me, that's just like every biography of every hero of mine, whether it's Willie or Neil Young or AC/DC or any bio you read on one of your favorite bands, they went through that stuff, right? And it's just gritty and real. Every time I play a crappy punk rock bar that stinks, but the energy's there, it's like, this is as real as it gets, right? It doesn't matter how big it is, it's the real shit. So whatever. That's how I feel anyway.
Well, I hope you and I get to play a dirty punk rock bar, if there are any of them left, at the end of this, and I hope we can have a beer together, man. It's really nice to talk to you. Yeah,
it was a lot of fun, man. It was interesting because I know you're friends already with a lot of the people on the podcast, so this is an interesting experiment. We've got to know each other through this podcast because we never talked before.
I know that there's been a handful of people that kind of like this that I've been in the same orbit as who a mutual friend puts me in touch, and I always knew that we were going to meet, and now we meet publicly over the phone, which is kind of strange, but
Yeah.
but
Well,
yeah, man.
I loved your thought. I loved your Schneider interview. It's great. You guys are buddies, right?
Yes, yeah. Todd Snyder helped me out very early on in my career, 10 or 12 years ago. I opened for him, and he's always kind of looked after me ever since. I love that guy. Do you know Todd?
A little bit. He's been great. He's been a sweetheart to me too, and I don't know why. I don't think he even barely knows who I am, but he's beautiful. I love that guy. Love his tunes. He's my favorite.
If anyone were to meet Todd and didn't love that guy, I wouldn't trust that person. So that's
yeah. He's like one of the most pure.
He's pure
guys doing it. Like it's all in the sleeve. You know what I mean?
It's all in his sleeve, and it's super old school. He is the last of a certain type of breed. He's a connection to, you know how you were saying that your family, like your father and grandfather, were like the last of this kind of oral tradition of music. Todd, I feel like, is one of the last people that have this connection to the music business that was the freewheeling 60s and 70s, man.
Yeah, just the tail end, eh?
Yeah, because he got taught by all. He wasn't around at the time, but he got taught by all those guys, and all those guys were still kind of like partying a little bit when he first came around. So he really got a taste for it.
You know what's interesting about him that I love is that often artists start out in their early materials kind of freaky and weird, and then they kind of become more and more normalized. His is the opposite. Like his early records are good, but I prefer his later stuff. Like his early ones are like, from looking at those compared to the current ones, like I feel like the songs get better, and he just raises the freak flag higher and higher every record, which is fucking great.
He really does. He is. There's no one like him now. So. Well, anyway, Corb, thanks so much, man. It's great to chat with you here, and I appreciate you being on the show.
Yeah, it's a blast, buddy. Let's have a beer when the dust settles.
This week's show is brought to you by Bandzoogle. Built by musicians and for musicians, Bandzoogle is an all-in-one platform to build a beautiful website for your music. Use promo code TWS, the initials of our podcast, TWS, to get 15% off the first year of any subscription. Corb Lund's latest album is entitled Agricultural Tragic, available everywhere music is sold or streamed. If before we meet again, you sit down to write, please remember, an expensive drug habit is not a song, a compelling Instagram account is not a song, and most importantly, reverb is not a song. So let all that take care of itself, and for you, just keep your eye on the song.